Barry, thank you so much for pulling in at long last. I'm going to try with the English until I cramp up.
En ek sal 'n bietjie met die Afrikaans probeer ook, maar
That's impressive.
Ja.
Where did you grow up?
ek het in die Vrystaat, ek was in die Vrystaat gebore in Virginia
Okay.
op die goudmyne.
Ja.
En dan toe the gold price collapse, my ouers het na Mpumalanga toe getrek.
Okay.
Witbank.
So Afrikaans was kind of a prerequisite.
Ja, al my vriende toe ek jong was op die myn, ons het
Ja.
op die myn groot geword, was Afrikaans. Ek het Afrikaans as 'n eerste taal geswat
Really?
toe ek by TUT was, ja.
Are we going to do this thing where I speak English and you speak Afrikaans? Classic.
No, I'll get caught up eventually.
Yeah. Thank you once again for pulling in. We've been messaging and trying to get you in for a podcast. I'm a huge fan. I was first just a follower with the Oscar Pistorius stuff. Fascinating stuff. That the book was. I haven't read it yet, but I heard it was amazing.
Oh, it is. It's
Full
fantastic.
disclosure, yeah, I'll check it out. Definitely, it's on my list, especially now with the parole stuff coming on. Do you have any opinions on that?
I think he'll get parole.
Is it?
He served his time. By all indications, he's been a good prisoner, a model inmate. And, that's what the court sentenced him to for punishment, and he's eligible for it now. I've got this opinion that I still believe, apart from what happened that night, which is a tragedy, and he's paid his dues, I think he's still got something to give back to the sporting community.
Sure.
I mean, as a disabled athlete, somebody who has inspired many youngsters and many people with difficulties, I really believe that, after rehabilitation, he can give back to the people with similar disabilities as his.
Yeah.
So that would be the ultimate outcome, and that's what rehabilitation.
That would be the perfect scenario. Do you get full of the questions around Oscar?
I have. It's been 10 years now, isn't it? We're
Yeah.
sitting on 10 years, so we've been
Yeah.
going on it, yeah. I mean, it still happens. You go to a braai, and you still get the question, did he kill her?
Yeah. What
Well,
really?
he did, but was it
Yeah.
murder or what?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm still getting those questions, but it speaks to how it gripped the nation,
Absolutely.
not just the nation, the world. I mean, let's not deny that. I was doing interviews for countries around the world at the time during the trial.
Yeah.
It spoke to, I think, to many people. He was idolized.
Absolutely.
Somebody who came from nothing, broke against or fought against great adversity to triumph,
Yeah.
and then came crashing down.
Crashing.
So it's one of those fairy tale type stories. It's a Shakespearean tragedy that played out in front of us.
It's incredible for me when you go through that specific scenario. It just speaks words around humanity. We put people on pedestals. We look up, whether it's a politician or an idiot that has the talent of acting or being funny or singing nice. We put these people on pedestals. We think they are gods, essentially. And then we are hit with this incredible disbelief. And sometimes in certain instances, even if, and I'm not talking about Oscar in particular, but even if there's damning evidence and everything points to something obvious, we still just say, I don't care. I adore this guy. I kind of almost religiously, unbid this idol of mine, and I don't care how wrong it is. It's strange.
I think there's it's human nature in there as well, is when you identify, I think, with somebody. And you feel that person speaks to you on a specific level, whatever that might be, whatever they've done in their life speaks to what you're doing. And, you're enamored by the individual and what they do. When you hear that they've done wrong, whatever that wrong might be, it's that sense of disbelief. You don't want to believe it because it ruins that which you've built up in your mind. And it's not unique to Oscar, as you pointed out. I mean, this we do in just about every facet of life.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's even more tragic where it is a parent or a brother or somebody you love intimately.
Of course.
And that kind of thing gets broken down.
It's that strange thing. Be careful of meeting your heroes.
Yeah.
You might be very disappointed. Anyway, in terms of me following you, I then became a super fan after the must have been muted comment you made with our friend Mr. Malema.
Oh yeah.
I then became a huge fan, and now I'm passionately following you and the stuff you do, and I think you're doing great work with Afriforum. Explain your role in that, because I was are you physically in the law side of the stuff, working with building these cases, or what is your role specifically there?
Well, I work with Advocate Gerrie Nel and his team there. There's about 10 of us all together at the privaat verlvolgings unit, the private prosecution unit. And what we do is we're basically picking up the pieces from a failing justice system.
Okay.
And we obviously take on cases where we want to privately prosecute. Now, there's a very specific section in the law where the NPA decides they are no longer going to prosecute. The Section 7 of the Criminal Procedure Act allows the individual who is directly involved, the complainant and so on, to get this, what they call a nolle prosequi certificate, and then you can privately prosecute. But that's just a fraction of what we do, really. We've got a couple of those cases on the go. A lot of what we do is watching brief stuff, where there's a matter enrolled and the police simply aren't doing their job, or the NPA is not doing their job. And we literally look over the shoulders of investigators and prosecutors to ensure that the job is done so that it's adequate, it's properly enrolled, properly investigated, and we can end up with a conviction at the end of the day. And that is a lot of the work that we're doing. My role is to communicate that.
Okay.
So I use my status as well and my position to be able to get that message out, but also tailoring the message in a far more palatable way. I'm studying law at the same time. I'm almost done. I've been doing it for nearly, I think, 8 years now through UNISA, and I'm almost there. But my whole goal with the development of my career now is to take the law, what happens in the courts, and communicate it to a public, because it's a lot of people don't understand it.
Yeah.
It's also, while we talk about the principles of open justice and the like, a lot of people, most people, have never attended a court. They don't understand the proceedings. So, for example, we hear it all the time when someone gets released on bail, that this is seen as some kind of indication of the person's innocence.
Of course. Yeah.
You know, we always hear that, that the person should never be denied bail because they did this and that. Whereas it's understanding that it's in fact a mechanism to ensure appearance for the trial and so on, and the attendance of the accused. So these kind of things, and trying to communicate the concept of private prosecution. We've had it big now with Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa, but it's unfortunate that bad cases like that, they get the highlighted and so on.
Yeah.
Whereas, the stuff we're doing, we've got a rape case down in Somerset East, a very strong case. It's being privately prosecuted by us, which we believe, in the face of a collapsing justice system, you get private security, you get private schools. Everywhere the private sector and individuals and organizations like Afriforum are picking up the pieces. We believe that in the face of a failing justice system, there is more scope, and I think it's imperative that there should be more leeway for the courts and the NPA to allow for private prosecution.
I think that's alarming when I speak to you. Is this, and you keep hearing that in your when you talk, is the failing justice system. And I'll be honest with you, it's something that's making me panic, because everyone, I think if an outsider, if you had to write a script with some of the cases that is clearly, you look at the ESCOM stuff, you look at all the other stuff, there's so much bullshit going on that's so clear, but everybody has this attitude of what's going to happen to them. Nothing's going to happen to anybody. And legally, how, I'm putting you on the spot here, but please feel free to say whether I comment, but how strong is the justice system still? How reliable?
We've got problems. What we are finding in our office is that you're not going to get justice unless you have an organization like ours guiding you through the process, walking you through the steps. We deal with rape matters, right? These are difficult cases. The complainants are psychologically harmed. They have to go and relive that trauma.
Wow.
And they will arrive at court on the morning they're supposed to testify. They have never consulted once with that prosecutor. Now, the prosecutor is there to present the complainant's case. He's on their side. But they would never have consulted beforehand. That morning, we see this often. Well, here's your statement. Read through it again.
What?
It's like that there's no caring. It's just a job. They've just got to get through it. We've seen instances where, entire cases are just inadequately investigated. That we have to come in and we provide, through the watching brief, guidance to investigators, do this, this, and this. Let me just tell you about our team. We've got the likes of Andrew Leask. I don't know if you know Andrew. No. He's worked with Gerrie for about 30 years. He's a former Scorpion. He was the lead investigator that put Jackie Salibi behind bars. He worked with Gerrie in that particular prosecution. We've got Chris Gous, also a former Scorpion, same as Andrew, former Scorpion. He's based down in Cape Town. He does a lot of our financial stuff. And all of our other guys, Slangmang Wale, also a former Scorpion. But these are senior detectives that were in the SAPS, within the criminal justice system, who've now Gerrie is handpicked and brought in for their expertise.
Proper A-team.
Absolutely proper A-team. But investigators with years, decades of experience on how to put together a case. Now, sadly, there was no real opportunity for these individuals to pass on their knowledge to a junior cohort of people coming in through the SAPS and so on. So what we're finding is, and I had a query this morning about the justice system to do with road accidents. I mean, how many people are actually held accountable for getting drunk and wiping out a family? Very few. And the reason is, from the start, from that day the accident happens and you have a car crash scene, the investigation fails because they don't reconstruct it properly. We've had cases where the families have to go around and find all the witnesses.
What?
Because the investigator on the scene didn't go speak to everybody that night and say, did you see it? What's your name, number, to go and get a statement back there.
But how do you guys deal, and how do you choose which case to follow? Because there must be literally like tens of thousands.
We've obviously got a very strict case management.
Okay.
And you're right, there are so many people that come to us for help. Where there is scope for us to assist, we certainly do. Like I said, mostly the watching brief. But if we would assess a case and you see, okay, it appears to be running smoothly, then we'll just keep an eye on it, but not get actively involved. Gender-based violence is one of our big focus areas. Mr. Nell is very passionate about this. And we actually had an interview last night with a complainant. And it is being investigated by the police. But sitting down with her, we start understanding of what's actually happening. The only statement that they've taken from this woman was when she was lying in a hospital bed in ICU in critical condition. That day where she was battered and blue and almost dying. She was in ICU for 2 weeks because of this beating. She hasn't spoken to the police since then.
Only on the day. And
only on the day there when she was so gedwal because she was on.
Anyway.
There's been no follow-up. So you've got to wonder, how are you going to successfully prosecute that case if you haven't gone back and got an adequate statement from her on the night, all these particular details?
Why do you think we in South Africa particularly have this seemingly huge proportionate increase in gender-based violence? Jy sien nou begin dit nou. Hoekom dink jy is dit so intens? Hoekom dink jy is dit so skewed in terme van want dit en ek dink 'n klomp van dit word nie report nie. Uit die aard van die saak, en dit is skaamte en dis van jy weet we have this it's well known where women get beaten up and whatever, but they it's a sense of security, they're too scared to leave. What do you think is it a bigger problem, or is it just because of the stress and normal day-to-day situations South Africans find themselves in?
Yeah, I'm not a sociologist or somebody who researched this and gone into it, but I think you're quite right, and we do have a serious problem, and it does appear to be worse than if you can pin it on a global standard if you want. It could reflect the widespread poverty in South Africa that we experience, because that has economic situations. I don't want to go into these particular terms, but the likes of patriarchy and that kind of aspect into it. Those do play a role. And on the issue of reporting, quite often we find that a complainant in such a matter, and you touched on it there, is economically dependent on the accused person, on the suspect.
Waar gaan ek gaan? Ja.
Where do I go? I don't have a house. I don't have a job. If I report this man, he kicks me out into the street, or he gets arrested and goes to jail, and then there's no income coming in for me and my children. So you end up with this difficult position where the victim accepts the abuse.
Absolutely.
Because there is too much weighing on it, and therefore there's no accountability. If we had stronger accountability, if we ensured that every time a man lifts his hand to a woman or a child, that they went to jail and they got punished, I think you'd certainly have a lot more, less incidents of such. But that speaks for everything else in the criminal justice
Exactly.
system.
That's the thing. It's
over. If there was accountability, you'd certainly see a far lot less of it.
And I think that links to my previous point, where ek is nervous, John, want jy sien iets, jy hoor iets en jy kyk op Twitter en dit in enige ander land, if this was a movie script presented, the producer or the product house, Paramount, whoever it was, will be like, this is a bit unrealistic, because nobody will be this blatant in their criminal activities. Although we see this, we read this, and it's just as if a certain portion of the country is just untouchable. And that makes people panic. And what example does that set to people a bit lower that is confronted with the temptation of corruption or taking a bribe or whatever? I mean, there's no accountability. So let's try. The system is weak enough for me to slip through.
He's doing it, why can't I?
Yeah.
You know, there's that kind of attitude as well. And it comes down to integrity and ethics and all things like that. I think we're seriously lacking in many regards. But if people at the highest position, I mean, and you know, you can think what you want about the president and his pala and all the rest of it. Fact remains, he had millions and millions of rands stuffed in a couch. I mean, just that in itself is irregular.
How do you get around that? But that boggles me. It's you read this and you're like, okay, but surely in any other country this was slam dunk. Thank you for coming. Imagine Trump did something like that, or
It
even
wouldn't be accepted.
wherever.
A British politician, for that matter,
anyone.
it would not be accepted.
It's like, stop the country. This is, and it's just the stories that comes out there. It's like almost, it's like listening to the Firepool verduideliking again. You know, like, dink jy ons gaan die kak glo? Verstaan wat ek bedoel? It's so blatant.
Well, let me discuss one of the other cases we're dealing with, and this was a story that I released when I was at Eyewitness News in 2017. And that's Fikile Mbalula and his trip to Dubai.
Yeah.
Now, excuse me, at the time, Mbalula was the Minister of Sport. Company by the name of Sedgers was a supplier to Sascock. One of the directors or persons involved in Sedgers paid several $100,000 towards Mbalula's trip to Dubai on a holiday. I mean, clear conflict of interest. You don't need to imagine. It's everything. The movement of money, they admitted it in a public protector report later on. Now, the public protector actually recommended that the NPA further investigate it and consider, I think it was money laundering they had suggested, but we're not even going there. But Afriforum eventually filed a criminal complaint. Now, we're in a position now, this man is the Secretary General of the African National Congress. It's not a complicated case. You have people in all these state capture matters being hauled over the coals for money laundering and corruption, complicated cases involving thousands of transactions. But the prosecutors are there and they're putting it away. I mean, all this kind of stuff. Big press statements. But here you've got Fikile Mbalula. A single transaction, a payment for a holiday that was paid for by a sporting supplier. Single, uncomplicated. Yet it's been sitting with the NPA now for 4 years. And they haven't made a decision to prosecute that matter.
But what now? Is there any step?
Yes, we've written to them. We've written to the police commissioner. Was the last step we're doing. But we're heading towards the case where we're going to have to go to a court and compel the NPA to make a decision, because it is irresistible that the reason that they're not doing it is because of the status of the individual involved. And this is a case of selective prosecution.
Yeah.
They'll prosecute. Let's look at Ace Magashule. Now fallen out with the political side of Cyril Ramaphosa. NPA goes after him, goes after all the people who've fallen out of the current clique. But the people who are on side, they won't go after them. I mean, it's a sad indictment on Shamila Batoy and the state of the NPA. She can crow all she likes about being independent and all the rest of it. The fact remains that somebody as high profile as Fikile Mbalula, or even Gwede Mantashe for that matter, look at what's happening with Desmond Nair, the chief magistrate in Pretoria. He also had cameras put in his house by Bosasa. He's on trial. He was arrested and he appeared in court. Gwede Mantashe, exactly the same thing. He's not being prosecuted.
That's so frustrating.
Explain it.
And it puts, like I said, everybody's like, what's the use? Why report it? Why blow a whistle? I'm just going to put my life in danger and nothing's going to happen. And being on that subject, you poke a lot at a couple of the big guys, big personalities, and big political influencers. Have you ever had a couple of
threats or anything?
Yeah,
like
threats. That? Fuck, I can't get the word threats. Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Afrikaans is the word threats. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't. I think in some respects, being a journalist over the years, it does provide some sense of shield. Getting things out, what I find, getting things out in the open is far safer than keeping it in.
Yeah.
And that speaks for whistleblowers as well. Sadly, what we're seeing now in South Africa, let's look at Babita Deokaran. I mean, she had stuff, was dealing with it internally, whatever. She was bumped off.
Yeah.
She was shot with her daughter in her car. I mean, it's absolutely awful. But all the other whistleblowers that came out of the state capture period, they're suffering. They've lost their livelihoods. They've lost everything because they did the right thing. And I think it speaks to the way this government feels about people who rat, if you want to call it that.
Sure.
It's
exactly what it is.
Yeah. They're exposing our misdeeds. Or we'll say, anti-corruption. But actually, what's going on?
And how do you deal with this as a society? What is your recourse? Do you just keep on, like institutions like Afriforum, and I love it. I've been very vocal about it in the past. I hate the existence of politics. I think if you have to explain politics, if there's aliens coming here, or you have to step outside the realm that we live in and you have to explain how politics works, it's essentially someone being geword, what's the English word? Popular.
Yeah.
It's a popularity contest, but not out of achieving anything. It's more out of bad-mouthing somebody else, creating barriers in terms of race or religion or culture, and then choosing a side that's hopefully big enough to get you into power. And irrespective of your background, of your training, of what your skills are, now you're being put in certain positions. People without any qualifications is now running energy or transport or whatever, and it doesn't make sense if you explain it to somebody like that. However, institutions like Afriforum, which I back, I love them. I think they have well, het eelt op die hande, because they shut up a bit more and they do a bit more. You know what I mean? They fix, they try. Yet they still get labeled as racist. Why do you think? Is it the Afrikaans connotation? Is it just a matter of stepping on toes and pointing out the fact that you guys are actually doing nothing? We'll just shut up and do something. Why do you think there's this huge racism connection and almost like a RVB movement type of thing that's going around, like the old Kaapia, basically?
I'm going to be mindful not to speak for Afriforum, the mother body, because I am, of course, the private prosecution. But I mean, me moving to the organization, I sat down with Cully and Ernst and we had a chat about it. And there is a perception about the organization. But you firstly, let's start off what Afriforum is. I mean, it's a cultural organization that is advancing and protecting the Afrikaans language and Afrikaners as a people, their heritage and so on. That mere existence, that somebody would do that, is what I think attracts the negative attention to it. That Afrikaners cannot do anything like that, not because of what happened in the past. They're not allowed to do it now. Yeah. And if they do, therefore you are racist. Yeah. I think that is the kind of criticism that gets thrown at the organization. But I think they've done a lot to shirk anything of that nature. You just look at some of the work to do with some of the indigenous communities or the tribes that the organization has started building bonds with. We're assisting some families and tribes and that with farming initiatives, for example. I don't have all the particulars on hand, but I mean, this is the kind of work that we're doing. You just got to look at what our unit does. I mean, the vast majority of the people that we are helping are black because, and this is the reality, the vast majority of the people who are being let down by the justice system are black.
Sure.
They are poor. Yeah. They don't quite understand, or they've never been taught the intricacies of that kind of system, the judicial system. And so they don't get guided through by the people who are supposed to. So they come to us for help. Yeah. And we help them. There's no question about the race of a person, the language that they speak or anything like that. It's about what we can do to assist and ultimately, where we can, patch up those holes that are appearing in the criminal justice system. Well, that's what we do. Afriforum as the mother body does a whole lot of other stuff in different areas,
Yeah. I love that, and I think that is the way forward. South Africa, I think, we have a problem in South Africa in the fact that until, and that's just my personal opinion, until we have... We are in this political system and there has to be change. But I'm not convinced that the majority, it is demographically the majority of the country are black. And I don't think there's this trust because of this type of rhetoric. And as soon as a white man does anything that gives a bit of that leaves a stick to be beaten with, you have to be so particular when you even post. I see some of the stuff Afriforum post and the work that you guys do. If there's any form of a color mentioned or a photo or whatever, it's that same rhetoric being repeated. So I want to ask you, and again, if you don't want to answer, it's fine. Out of a holistic approach from South Africa. I don't, in my personal opinion, think there's not going to be people vote for color. If there's no opposition that has a strong black alternative leader, I don't think people are going to vote. And it's unfortunate, and it's obviously not ideal, but it's the truth. It's fact. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think there's some truth in that, but I think that's a legacy of what we're dealing with in South Africa. We're a highly racialized society, and we like this because of what happened in the past. It was built into the government machinery that this is how people are going to be divided. So, despite generations, coming along, new young people and so on, there is, I think, still a lot of distrust. Sometimes I think it is unwarranted. I'll give an example. Just this week, we had the new UCT acting vice chancellor, I think it is, that was appointed after Pakeng moved. I mean, obviously, a lot of controversy surrounding her appointment, and we hear about a strong black woman and an academic and so on. But the person who was appointed to act in the position is an Indian gentleman, and immediately, if you look at the criticism, that became the focus point.
Yeah.
That you're replacing a black woman with an Indian gentleman, and
Forget
forget the fact that for all what he's done is good, and I mean he's played no part in his appointment and so on, and forget his academic qualifications. The point of criticism was the fact that he was Indian, and I think that is unfortunate, and I think it's unfair to him, and it doesn't aid the debate.
How do we as society get past that point? Is it just, I believe it's going to take a lot of more time, but just by doing what you guys are doing. And eventually, we've seen it a lot of times with news. Unfortunately, journalists have this huge responsibility. And unfortunately, it's also true that a lot of journalism in the modern era are not trusted because it's so propaganda-driven on whichever side. I mean, if you look at America, it's so blatant.
Oh, America's worst. I mean, they've got a problem.
It's cringing. If you watch CNN, it's so obvious. If you watch Fox, it's so obvious.
Absolutely.
There's the guys in the middle and the fringe guys on the way left and the way right. I just switch that, I'll do that. The way right and the way left, they get hyped up and do stupid shit with all of this stuff. And that's unfortunate. But how does a society, especially like South Africa, move forward? Because they hear all the promises and they'll vote, and they'll even directly after voting ANC, they'll go and they'll picket and get angry and cause devastation because of this anger, which is understandable, although they won't switch the vote. How do we move past that?
Yeah, I think we need to look at examples of doing good. And again, you touch on Afriforum. And you look at what, I forget his first name, but his surname is Papas, down in Mgeni. Down in...
the blonde guy.
Yes, short guy, but...
Fluent in Zulu.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's gained the trust of that community.
Absolutely.
But he's also showing that he's not just all about talk.
Yeah.
He's making the little municipality work. Yeah. He's cleaning the roads. He is making sure that the rubbish is collected. And where there are problems, he's addressing them. He goes down to grassroots level and he speaks to people. So I think that kind of conduct and action breaks any kind of racial barriers there might be. I think it goes a huge way that he's from the area. He can speak the language of the people. And that encourages trust. But demonstrating, and the same can work for Afriforum, demonstrating that collaborative work with communities can produce results.
Sure.
Irrespective of background. If you work together with a common goal, you end up with a result. Take and again, I don't have this offhand, the municipality, I think it could have been Koster, where there was the municipality had allowed the water treatment plant to fall into disrepair.
Yeah.
And an urgent interdict was obtained, and the management of that facility was handed over to Afriforum. And they brought in the experts, and within 2 weeks, clean water was running.
Absolutely. That just shows the privatization of stuff works, because there's competition, there's competence, and there's people with the right skills wanting to do the stuff.
Well, the person appointed to go and fix the job isn't there because of his connection to this person. He's appointed because he's an engineer who understands it and knows how to fix it.
Yeah. How? Again, I'm putting you under the spotlight now. How long? Because I have a lot of, there's a lot of negativity about South Africa. I was overseas now, and a lot of people. The first question you get asked quite often is, "How bad is it now?" Because obviously they receive just the news and the bad stuff. They miss this stuff. They miss the communities building together. They miss all the good stories because it's not news. It doesn't create a lot of sensation. But how long do you think I believe this country has a lot of potential. I mean, we all do. The biggest asset the country has is its people. And ironically, that's what's preventing the decisions of this mass is what preventing us all to live in a paradise. How long do you think we still have until there's a glimmer of hope? Do you think it will come after a bit of a regime change, or do you think it will, which is actually the right way? And there's a lot of hints showing that. Because everybody has this line that they draw in the sand. There's this moment in every person's life where they draw a line in the sand and they say, I don't care about the implications of what's going to happen to me if you cross this. If somebody threatens your family, for instance, you don't care if you go to jail. You're going to protect them, and if you are confronted with the same situation, and you'll do it again. And I think people are getting heartful, and that word is being used a lot. All over. The South Africans as a whole are getting heartful and seeing this. To put you on a bit of a spotlight, are we moving in the right direction? Sometimes it needs to get worse to get better. And a lot of people understandably wants to move, and there's a lot of brain drain and a lot of talent leaving the country. However, I feel that there's still a lot of opportunity if we manage and do things the right way. Are we heading in the right direction? Or is that direction still a bit off? Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
I don't know.
That's
a long question you've thrown at me, but I don't know. I think there are pockets of hope.
Okay.
In every sector, there are certain things that people and organizations are doing that are going in the right directions. But I think generally, if this country heads on its course, we've just spoken about the collapse of the criminal justice system. We know about the collapse of the electricity infrastructure. You go drive down a road, if you don't have a 4x4, your tires are shot.
Yeah.
These little things, and all of it's culminated. I'll tell you a story. My parents, they've emigrated. They decided they've had enough. They went to the UK. They used to live in Witbank.
They made a good move.
joking.
Joking.
I was always, they were saying about, because it got so bad out there, regular power outages, so they had a generator hooked up and everything. Regular water outages, they had a JoJo tank and that thing. While Pretoria was fine, I say, Mom, Dad, move to Pretoria. You can retire here. I was honestly that naive that those problems would not come to the big city. And here we sit. Here we sit with Rand Water knocking out the water supply to one of the biggest metros in the country. Constant electricity supply issues. I mean, it is just outright collapse. So it's difficult, I think, for anybody to try and remain optimistic, given what we're facing. But I do believe, that with collaborative efforts, organizations, individuals, pulling together with a common goal, ultimately can do that. And it's going to be like chipping away at little aspects here and there where you can. But politically, I think, I don't think this country can endure more of ANC.
Well, we can't. We can't afford to. The question is, and that's the big question, what is it going to take to get the masses? Because if everybody just go and vote. But now we know, and again, if this was a movie, everybody would be like, come on, we can't put this in, this is too radical.
But what's the next lot we get? A bunch of another communists.
That's the problem. That's the problem. And if everybody just go and vote for once, what's the percentage of people voting? I think it's shockingly low.
Yeah, I don't know what the turnout was. I can't tell you offhand.
It's crazy, but still, I think what I am seeing is people. You get a lot of people that hulle skoppel hake in. And hulle sê ek gaan nie en ek gaan, and they start getting more independent. You see with of course not everybody can afford it offhand, but things like solar, things like getting off the water grid and all that type of stuff. Businesses are starting to force themselves slowly but surely, and there's more mechanisms, financing models getting introduced into the market where people can slowly but surely get more independent, and that's something I like. I think the more independent anybody can be from any government provided service is brilliant. And you should have that outlook from now. If you're a new upcoming business, take an extra investment and work it into your financial model, but get off the grid and be independent.
A fascinating article out this week, or it was last week, where they were talking about the impact. And this is a byproduct of what we see now of people going independent. The people that are going independent onto the solar grid, for example, solar system at home, they are the people who are actually paying for their electricity as well.
Exactly.
But they're hot full of being without power, so they go and build solar and they get off the grid entirely. Now the municipality, which relies on that revenue from electricity, is not getting it from the people that are paying. And so further, their revenue declines and their ability to maintain this infrastructure and so on. I mean, it's just a calamity the way everything's.
And again, the sad thing is it's the guy in the township that's going to suffer the most, because the revenue that should have been generated to get them electricity and services now is gone. So it's a very awkward system. But I still believe that, again, leaves opportunity for entrepreneurship and guys coming in and creating solutions for even the guy on the street to get off the grid, which you are seeing now in smaller instances. So there's always this element of, with every door closing, there's always this opportunity. And I think we need more leaders, young guys, we need more entrepreneurs to see that gap. And eventually I think South Africa can be this place that's almost run independently, and I think that's the hope. I think that's the only future, is to be as independent as possible and localized.
Well, what you refer to there is one of the big campaigns that Afriforum has taken on now, and that is federalism.
Federalism, yeah.
We're a massive country. We've got demographics that vary from place to place on a large scale, but we are being run by a centralized government.
Yeah.
And the proposal there is to decentralize that, have it down to a provincial level and maybe even further. But that is one of the main driving factors, or the driving campaigns of Afriforum, is that issue of federalism. Because the national government is just...
it's not going to work.
No, look at Eskom.
But what is the critics going to say again? It's obviously going to be another form of, everybody wants Urania now, or everybody. And what is the issue with that?
That's immediately the criticism.
I've read something now, and look, I'm not pro Urania. I mean, I love living where I'm living, and there's a certain reason why I want to stay where I want to stay. You shouldn't be forced to go into an extreme sense of control and say, like, well, I want to live on my own. But if you want to, why not? If it's private and
it is a free country.
And why do you think there's such a, is it obviously because the guys are white and Afrikaans? And
no, I think that's the
only reason.
And again, I don't have the facts before me, but that kind of arrangement is not unique. There's a black community in South Africa with a similar arrangement, and they're functioning on their own and so on.
And with great stories. I've seen them actually meeting with each other. I've read on Twitter, which is, we'll talk about Twitter, but where these guys are having meetings and exchanging ideas, and it's actually a great story about these two independent living situations of these people and creating a peaceful way of living and a chosen path where they want to live like that, and they're exchanging ideas and actually, in a partnership sort of way, but that gets ignored. That's a cock story to tell.
I think Urania is a great model to be copied.
Yeah.
By any community.
Yeah.
If you can get it down to even maybe your suburbs or something, like just getting people together. Again, I speak about that organization, common purpose, and you get it done. I mean, there's something to be learned there. I mean, we have the Constitution, and one thing we will not tolerate is discrimination.
Of course,
and so
but that's a different subject.
Absolutely.
Of course.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
But these are a group of people who decide on their own, we want to do it for ourselves.
Yeah. I think that's the only way, and that's the future. I think Urania's criticism might be the fact that you need to be of a certain cultural orientation. That's a bit of maybe a red flag for some other people to look at the thing, and that leaves a stick, even though it's a cultural thing and not a racial thing. But that still leaves a stick for them to be beaten with, and that may be in their disadvantage.
I think of, and I've thought about it as well. I mean, I'm an Englishman, and I think about these things as well. And I think of communities like the Amish in America.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, there's a people who are bonded by a particular religion and a way of life. I mean, there's one thing, they've shirked all modernity, and they live in this as if it was still 200 years ago. And that's what they've chosen to do for themselves, and they shun actually outsiders. But they're not harming anybody. They're not doing anybody. If you want to join, you've got to comply and you've got to get in and do what they want to do. But I don't believe that they should be denied that right. Mm. And I think that's where there's scope. And, as long as nobody's being harmed.
Mm. Why do you think there's this massive drive to force a type of an integrational or to force integration point? I mean, a lot of people... If you look at sports, for instance, there's people sitting on the stand of multiple cultures, multiple backgrounds, whatever, but they are bound by a common event or common sport. So why do you think there is this obsession with forcing people without similar, I would say, interests, backgrounds, and whatever, and try and force them upon each other? Isn't that like kind of a recipe for for creating a arena for unnecessary conflict.
I think it is. I mean, this is social engineering, and this is exactly what the previous government was doing, but the opposite. I think if you look at the younger generations, without being compelled, without any force of government, there is diversity and there is integration.
Sure.
I see it with my children. They go to a public school. I see it there. I see it in their friends, and that there's no need for any forcing of this. But I think where there is segregation, I think you can attribute it, and again, I'll say I'm not a sociologist, but largely to a legacy of what we're dealing with in this country, a legacy of apartheid, where this kind of social engineering was foisted on the population. You're not going to shirk it.
You can't force it. You can't.
But you're not going to get rid of that kind of. It won't just fade away in 2 decades, for example. I think it's sad, and it's going to be around for still some time.
Yeah.
But I do believe with the new generations, younger people in this country, there's no need to force anybody. It's a natural way that people get on with their lives and do what they want to do.
Once again, I take sport as a kind of a mediator, and that's why people always think, it's just a game. It isn't just a game. Take rugby for instance. It is not just a game. That uplifts people. People get emotional when we win because we feel united, and we are united for that brief moment where all the bullshit is set aside, and it doesn't matter the color. It only matters if the guy next to you is wearing green. That's it. We don't give a shit about the rest of the stuff. And it's for me, it's like society and the media and all of this is creating this narrative that there's a lot of differences, and you have to. Some differences are more acceptable than others, and we have to force everybody together, and not only together, but you are now forced to be within a cultural environment or vice versa, which you are not necessarily, you don't have any interest, or you don't hate anybody. It's like a guy that has a drink versus a guy that likes coffee. They're gonna go to a bar, and they're gonna, irrespective of who's in the bar, but there's the same interest. There's all of this, and I think to highlight the fact that so there's differences between you two, and we, of course there are, but there's actually fuck all different. We enjoy the same humor. We enjoy the same food. We enjoy the same joke. We enjoy the same music.
Both go to work.
We both go to work, and we have respect. We look after our families. But the media tries to emphasize the differences and create these divisions. What is your opinion about the current journalists out there? The level of quality journalism. What is your opinion about that at this stage?
I'm very reluctant to criticize my former colleagues. But I think I think there has been valid criticism, and I don't think journalists, serious journalists, have been ignorant of the kind of criticism that has been, thrown at the media. If you look at the way the COVID reporting was handled, there was a lot of criticism in that it was the media essentially took on the role of being government mouthpiece, and dissenting voices were shot down. Whereas we're seeing a lot of the stuff that you couldn't say it 2 years ago. Now you can say it, and it's become almost acceptable that you can say, masks don't work, or that type of criticism. So I still believe, and in South Africa, we've got some of the best journalists in the world, investigative journalists. I mean, off the top of my head, I think of Jeff Wicks. If you look at the stuff he's done on Babita Deokaran and the exposing of corruption there, the guys at Daily Maverick, for example, and the investigations they do there, Scorpio, the team that they do. I mean, that is the top type of reporting I think that this country needs.
Yeah.
It assists in the understanding of where we are in the country. I mean, expose of what's going on in Eskom and all the rest of it. But I think what your criticism is maybe about the day-to-day grind of a journalism. You switch on a television and you watch back-to-back press conferences of government spokespeople. I mean, it just kills me.
Yeah.
I can't do it. And I think that criticism of that, I think, is justified.
Yeah.
But you know what? And there's a lot of stuff I don't like. I just don't read it.
Exactly.
I turn off the TV.
Choose it. Scroll. You touched on it now, the Eskom stuff, and I want to get your opinion on that. I mean, that was, again, I don't know how set up it was or what the situation was, but I think it was brilliantly handled. That's now for me a great example of proper journalism. And that was so honest. I think that video was so crucial. And I hope a lot of people take that example. What do you think is going to happen? There's obviously a private, the writer said that there was a private thing he had going on the side with funding, which is brilliant. I'm so glad somebody said, no, we're not going to take this bullshit. We'll help you. What is your opinion about this thing, and what do you think is going to happen?
Well,
easy questions today.
Well, I mean, which aspect we're looking at? The power generation or the accountability?
I think the accountability, because I think the generation will fall into place once the accountability is set in place.
If you go by the reports, it appears we're so far down this road, it's almost irretrievable. How criminal syndicates have taken over certain aspects of the power generation.
It's scary shit.
Supply chain. I mean, one of those aspects, the transport of coal. I mean, like I said, I told you earlier that I grew up in Mpumalanga on the coal mines, and there was a transition point at some stage where they went away from rail, and the mines, under the pressure for transformation and the like, started hiring more trucking companies. And the trucking companies were black-owned and so on, so you empower the people. I mean, this is a great initiative.
Right.
Now you have all these trucks on the road, and it starts getting expensive, and the prices go. And now they control it. Mm-hmm. The moment somebody decides, well, you're not going to move coal anymore, they just shut down the road.
That's it.
And they use that power to, achieve illegal means within the Eskom supply chain. And this is what we're seeing in recent reporting. But I think that's just one aspect of the road freight. I mean, the supply chain in every other aspect. Carl Cowan from News 24 has done possibly the most comprehensive reporting on what's going on at Eskom, and he'll give you some insight into how bad it is.
That story is just crazy. I mean, the sabotage, the blatant stuff, it's like watching a mafia movie.
Yeah.
And, it's crazy. But the only way you fix that is make an example. I think it's the same thing that happened with the mob in New York when Giuliani did that. Make an example. There has to be accountability. Try something within your means and put these guys behind bars. Nice. Behind bars. Because then everybody would be like, oh, shit. So if I do this, we must check, we must back away. Or I'm going to take my money and I made my fat share, and now I'll leave it. I'll step out, which is actually, if I was a criminal, that would be the intelligent thing to do if you had the emotional intelligence.
But you know what will happen? This is what we see from the NPA. Let's assume they investigate some senior government official and a senior chap in Eskom, and they're implicated in corruption. You know what the NPA will do? They'll put together a charge sheet with about 5,000 charges and 10 million counts on 50 million transactions, for example. And they'll compile a docket that is, they never stop investigating. They'll investigate and they'll keep adding to the docket until it's about this high. And they'll complicate the matter and they'll make it so convoluted that it will never, ever get to trial.
Yeah, I agree.
Whereas if you had a prosecutor with half of, to think about it, what he's doing, these charges carry minimum sentences. You don't need racketeering and all these other things. No. You need a charge of corruption. A government official carries a minimum sentence. Get him in on one transaction, and you can do it. But they don't. Yeah. And the suspicion is they do this on purpose. Because of the people that you're dealing with. So you don't want to get there. So you make it so complicated that nothing ever happens.
So you think it's going to be a question of we'll look into it, and then they are looking into it, and there's another organization, another power, what do they call it, action team, or what?
Committee or a task team, or who knows what.
It's going to be again and again, and in 2 years' time, we win the World Cup again, end of this year, and everybody forgets about it.
Yeah.
I think so, but the lights are staying off, so I think that will remain the main thing. Let's hope.
Yeah.
So, Barry, this was very lekker. Ek het dit nou geniet. Ek dink dis die meeste dat ek Engels gepraat het in my hele lewe.
Nee, baie dankie.
Ek is nou dors, ek moet nou bier drink. I appreciate it. It's great. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for the work you do. You and Afriforum do. Is there going to be any involvement from Afriforum and Gerry's side in this whole Eskom thing at this stage, or you can't divulge?
Well, our doors always open. Okay. And there might have been some advances here and there, but where we can, like I said to you earlier, we've got a fantastic team of excellent prosecutors. Advocate Phyllis Foster works together with Advocate Gerry Nel. That's our prosecuting team. And, our doors open. Anybody want to come bring us something? And, of course, become a member of Afriforum.
Yeah, I also pay my little bit every month. And if I can see it working, then it creates the sense of I'm doing my part, at least. Dankie Chom. Dit was regtig
Baie
lekker. Dit
dankie.
was 'n groot voorreg and keep on doing what you're doing.
Dankie Rikus.
Lekker.